I'm Dave Mueller, otherwise known as Perl Jedi on all the appropriate places. I'm here with Liquid Web, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the module I'll be releasing at the end of this month, which is Any Event Kubernetes. So the basics, what's Any Event Kubernetes? It supports all the same operations as Net Kubernetes, except that it's slightly modified for an event-driven system. So just rather than simply returning the objects or lists as appropriate from methods, you will supply on success or on error callbacks, which will be invoked when the appropriate resources have been retrieved from the API server. This is all sitting on top of Kubernetes REST API. So an example would be like this for fetching a pod. I'm not going to try to cover all of the functionality of Any Event Kubernetes because mostly it's the same as Net Kubernetes. It's just with this slight modification. One feature I did build into this was that Any Event Kubernetes can be forced to operate synchronously on any given operation. So simply passing a return flag will actually make it behave more like Net Kubernetes. One key difference from Net Kubernetes actually returns a proper array of resources from the list methods, whereas Any Event Kubernetes, I've made a resource list a first-class object, and the reasons for that will be forthcoming. So you can get a resource list like this. If you really want the array, you just call all on the list object, and it will actually give you back that array. So why did I write Any Event Kubernetes? Simple answer is there are a couple of features that I didn't really feel I could offer in a non-event driven system that lend themselves well to actually event-driven programming. Two examples of this: watching for resource changes. So basically any of the list methods that you can call against the REST API, you can supply a watch flag to it, which will upgrade it to a streaming HTTP connection and actually send down object notifications whenever any item in the list of resources is modified, including when new resources are added to the list or when resources are removed from the list. The other thing is rolling update. This is something that the Kubernetes command line utility offers, which is very handy for releasing code. But technically, we could have done this entirely procedurally without event-driven programming, but it didn't really make sense. I mean, one of the useful features of the rolling update is that you can interrupt it midway through and actually roll back. And in a purely procedural world, you couldn't really interrupt the routine mid-run without just killing your entire program. I wanted to be able to interrupt it programmatically. So, watching resource lists. Like I just said, the REST API, any of the list operations supply a watch flag to create a streaming connection. So with Any Event Kubernetes, you can simply pass an onChange handler into your list call, and you will get that streaming functionality. You will get your onChange handler will be called every time any resource object in the list changes in any way. When invoked this way, the list methods will return a cancellation guard. This is really just a code reference that allows you to terminate the streaming connection. So to stop watching this list, essentially you just invoke the cancel callback. So rolling update, entirely command line utility, entirely implemented client side. Really what this does is creates a second. It's used for replication controllers. It creates a second replication controller with the modifications. I need to speed the hell up. Okay, so rolling update you can call this way, and rolling update will provide a cancellation guard just like the watched resource. It will also invoke your on-scale callback every time one pod is moved from the old replication controller into the new replication controller. This will give you a chance to check out the new pod that was just created, see if it's healthy, and if for some reason your pods aren't coming up healthy, you can cancel it midstream. All of this is going to be available in the version 1 release by the end of the month. I also wanted to give you a quick preview of some of the things that I want to offer in my second version of the release. One of them is more ways to watch resources. So currently when you watch a resource, say you're watching a list with 10 pods, the first 10 times your onChange gets called is just to populate the list with all 10 objects, and then thereafter you'll actually get modified notifications. what I'm going to do is allow you to fetch a list of pods and then supply an on change. So your list is already built up. You're not getting the 10 extra events. You don't have to do the work of building your pod list yourself. It's done for you, and you'll really only get change notifications to your on change sub. The next thing I wanted to do was allow you to watch a single resource. The get calls, so getting a specific pod from the REST API, does not accept a watch flag. Using field selectors, there is a way to effectively simulate this. So I wanted to provide an interface to do that. So you'll be able to fetch a single resource and then provide an on-change sub to get notified anytime that resource changes on the server. And the last thing I wanted to do was essentially allow you to keep asynchronously up to date on any objects you've pulled down. So you'll get a keep fresh method on all of your resource and resource lists, which will essentially supply their own on-change callback, which will just keep your object up to date with whatever changes on the server as it changes. So you can fetch a resource, and even 5 minutes later, you can be sure that that resource has the current stuff from the server. That's all. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Denis Sherkov. I'm self-outsourcing software development company. We are a United States-based company. We have offices in Russia, Ukraine, and some other countries. So if you're interested in such services, feel free to catch me in a break. I will give you more information. Good luck.
For anyone who wants to give an advertisement, it's a small room. You can just stand up and speak loudly. We won't worry about the people on the other end of the camera quite as much, but give it a fair shot. And we have room for another one. We have technical difficulties here.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Some of you saw my test talk yesterday.
Did it? No, I don't want mirroring.
Tomorrow I will actually be giving a lightning talk to try and explain as much of the test2 internals and how it all works as quickly as I can.
Should I? Can I? Okay. Hi, this is Kiwan, and I'm going to talk about the only CPAN module I've built so far. And be warned, I'm still a beginner, so it's not the most beautiful module you will see. But still, I wanted to share the story, so here I go. So this is about a Turkish social network called Ekşi Sözlük. This is basically a user dictionary where users can go define their own topics that you see on left, and under those topics they can add their own definitions, as they call entries, that you see on right. So this is a pretty old website. This was founded in 1999, and it's the 6th most visited website of Turkey according to Alexa right now. But the thing is, they don't have an official API, so you cannot send a request to the beautiful data they have. One nice feature they have is they publish this list of best posts of yesterday. So every morning, users get to see what was happening on the website yesterday, and clicking through every single link, opening images, references, it's a pain. So I thought, why don't just build a script that fetches everything, merges it into a single nice formatted HTML, and sends an email to me so that I can read it much more easily. So I did. This happened 3 years ago, but that was not a CPAN module at the time. It was just a script. Then I thought, why not build a CPAN module out of it, since I'm parsing the website already, so that if anyone else wants to build a project on that website, they can just use my module, and I would be happy if they used. So I did build this CPAN module called www.Ekşi Sözlük, and I posted it to prepan, got some comments back, and I published it. So it's live for almost 2 years now. It's not very beautiful, but it works fine, so it's good. It requires bug fixes every now and then, but I'm happy to maintain it. So that's that. And after publishing this module, I had one more project idea to build on that Turkish social network. So if you use Twitter, you must have seen tweets like this. Twitter users tend to, as I observed, post as soon as an earthquake happens. It might not be a good survival skill, but that makes Twitter a very good earthquake monitor. And there are actually research done in USA, in Japan, in Australia to build Twitter monitors, earthquake monitors out of Twitter data. And it works perfectly fine. You will be surprised. But you also get some noise as well. So not all tweets that mention earthquake are related to earthquakes. So my idea was to use two sources to make this earthquake monitor a better one with doing some cross-validation. So I did. What you're seeing is on the left, this is a Twitter streamer. On the middle, you're seeing a counter for Twitter data. On the right, you're seeing a counter for Ekşi Sözlük. So it's streaming both sides for Turkish word for earthquake, and then it checks if both sides alert at the same time or not. So that worked just fine, and we run it for a short amount of time, but it actually prevented several false positives. So we were happy with it, and we actually got a paper out of it published in a conference in Turkey. So there's that, and I still have a lot to do, a lot of bugs to fix, and I will probably be working on that on tomorrow's PR challenge, so feel free to join me. I will be there, and thanks.
We're always accepting applications. We love Perl, we love Perl developers, we love Git, we operate MySQL. Send in your resume, telecommuting,
Let's see. Where did my mouse go? Oops.
And we're sponsoring the next lightning talk.
Okay.
Galen and Steven, are you here?
Okay. All right. So I need my notes because I decided to do this last minute. So hopefully this will work. No. Oh, I switch. Okay. So that's this. Yeah.
People here have heard of my show last week. They're cool. How many are listening to it on a regular basis? The show is coming up on 10 years now, so if you don't know anything about it, go to twit.tv/floss and find out how it became the #1 hostess for podcast. 50,000 downloads a week.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about one of my favorite ways of doing tests, which is using table-driven tests. I've noticed that a lot of people don't always know what table-driven tests are, so I was hoping to bring this type of technique up to more people, and so that I'll see it more often in the wild. And you know, how often have you? Oh, what? All right. How often have you opened up a test case and or a test file, and you've just seen a bunch of test methods that pretty much do the same thing over and over again, and you're looking to add a new test case to it, or maybe fix a test case, and you have to scroll and try to find where you should add the test file to. And instead, if it looked more like a table-driven test, where you have a table of data that encapsulates, all of the input that goes into your test to the function you're testing, and then plus the expected values, and then there's a bit of code that just runs through those tests, making sure they all run and pass. I find it to be much easier to add tests, to remove tests that are no longer valid, or to modify, or even when I'm new to a module or a code base, to go into the test files and get an understanding of what the functions are doing. So what does it take to write a good table-driven test case? Well, each row of the table that the test code is going to iterate through should just be one test that you're running. And then you want to, again, include all the inputs that you would be passing to that function that you're going to be testing. And then, of course, what you expect out of that function that's going to be compared using the various things. And also, very important, if you expect the test to fail, like if there's going to be a exception that happens and you want to catch that exception, or you want it to be a false value, put that in so that it becomes clear that, hey, this is a bad test case that you're making sure that your function handles correctly. And then I like having a description added to the test so that when it fails, I can put in a little bit more, something that's more descriptive so that you can easily find it in the table. What did I say? Is it not moving? Advantages. Oh yeah, so some of the advantages of using this technique that I found, again, it's very easy to see what the input and the expected values are of your tests when you do this format. You can easily see if you're missing edge cases by scanning the table really quickly, instead of having to scroll through the test file looking for what ends up being hidden by all the testing code itself, instead of just seeing the data. And then, as I've mentioned a few times already, it's really easy to add new test cases. And then I feel it gives better documentation for anybody who's new to the code base to be able to see what the function expects as input and what it is expected to output. One of the things I like to do, if you notice before, we were using an array of hashes where the hashes had the expected value, the input values. I actually like using a hash of a hash instead. And the main reason for that is it gives two benefits. The first benefit that it gives you is that the keys act as a natural descriptor, right? So you can have the key acting as something that tells you what the test is trying to test, why you want that test to be there. And then also hashes, the order is not guaranteed. So you get a nice random thing, whereas with an array of hashes, there is possibility that there could be coupling between your tests that you don't realize. Thank you.
I know you have a minute.
Oh, I have a minute. Well.
Oh, unless you hit thank you. Stephen or Galen yet? Just checking. Room for an ad, please, ready.
Okay. A one-sentence suggestion padded out to a lightning talk, which probably means I'll still overrun the 5 minutes, but here we go. So last year at YAPS-EU, I gave a talk on this module, which is a plugin for Modulus to enable you to implement a OAuth2 authorization server. which is kind of the opposite side to what most people want, but I needed that. And I threatened to split the guts out into something that was reusable for not just modulicious, which I did, and that wasn't actually for selfish reasons, it was for selfish reasons. I needed to write tests against this module, which is a API client for a new bank in the UK called Mondo. They're a modern bank, which is quite a scary thought, but they're actually very, very good. And what I was doing is I was writing tests using an emulator, and the reason I was doing that is because of REST, which is that thing. I'm sure we're all aware of that. So when I looked at the Mondo docs, I thought, well, these all, they kind of look familiar. They look a lot like the Stripe docs, which look a lot like the GoCardless docs, and so on and so forth. These all look, yeah. But they're not. You kind of get the impression that they're all doing the same thing, but they're not, because this is REST. So you look into the details and you see all these very subtle differences. And you look further into the specs and you see even more differences. So this is Mondo, which seems pretty sensible, and you compare that to, I think this is a Stripe, which use epoch times rather than ISO 8601 times. You look at GoCardless, which say you should set a reference of this long, but if it's a payment type of this long, it needs to be this long. And do they return a 400 if it's not the right reference? I don't know. And the PayPal docs, which you can only use the API to get transactions which you sent using their API, which kind of tells you how they've implemented it, which is fair enough. And this is, I think this is Campaign Monitor, which all the endpoints return JSON apart from one which returns XML. And what's this one? This is Facebook, which say, I'm sure this is a typo, you have to send the auth amount as a base 64 UTF-8 encoded string, and the auth currency is the same thing, which doesn't seem that sensible to me, but fair enough. This is, this is Twitter, which say, oh, we use the conventions in the GeoJSON. Unfortunately, the coordinates that Twitter renders are reversed. And this was module I was writing, and I said to them, please, can you use HTTP status codes to return errors, 400s, etc. And said, well, no, because they're the transport, they're not the actual application implementation. But the RFC says, well, no, it doesn't really matter. And you kind of end up in that state, really. But I'm not into backshedding, because that's just a waste of time and not that fun. What I'd like is for people to write emulators. And it doesn't have to be stateful, it just needs to mock the data. And it's great for tests. It's like TDD on steroids, because you can write tests without having to monkey patch. And it makes your CI a lot less fragile, because you're not relying on a third-party test server which doesn't have an SLA and changes when they release a new update to it and breaks all your tests. This is a preview of the Mondo emulator, which uses OAuth 2, the plugin that I mentioned earlier on. I needed to use password grant, which it didn't support, so that's why I kind of did all the refactoring. That's running it. That's the test coverage, just using the emulator, which is close to 90%. Add the unit tests and you get almost 100%. So this is a suggestion. If you're building a RESTful API, don't just release docs, but actually release an emulator as well. And I'm not talking about a test server. I'm talking about a standalone executable that you release for people to use. Dogfood it, because we write tests against our APIs. We write our APIs, but I think we don't really use our APIs as clients. And obviously update it when you update your API docs, which is easy to do now if you're using OpenAPI, Swagger, and so on. That's me developing against the Mondo emulator. I was the fifth one down when I actually hit the live endpoint, and that was just one change I needed to make, having written the emulator. But it turned out that was all in vain, because they decided they would deprecate password grant anyway. So, and that's just an example of Mondo. As I said, they're a modern bank. They're all real time, which is very useful. And I won't show the example. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Hey. All right. I'm good. Okay, how to improve your Perl code in just 16 years. So, who am I? Nobody special. Don't worry about it. And that is kind of my point. I've been developing it for about 20 years. I started in C. The last 16 has been in Perl. And so I should be pretty good by now, right? Well, I'm okay. Some people have even called me better than average. But I could and should be better than I am by now. So what happened? Years of coding in a vacuum. Working on in-house frameworks, closed source projects, not seeking out other programmers, not coming to YAPC, and not a very active community where I live. And so from my perspective, I believed that Perl was dying, and I said, maybe it's time to think about this, and maybe I should get out of Perl. But I love Perl, and it's so good, I did not want to leave it. So I decided it was time to get in and dive deeper. And when I did, blew my mind. The change was instant. My perspective, it just was totally different. And in the last 18 months, my code has improved probably more than the decade before that. I set myself 3 goals. I wanted to contribute to an open source project. I wanted to release my own CPAN module, and I wanted to come to the conference. And so right about that time, Neil started the CPAN pull request challenge, and I thought, well, that's not for me, because I'm not good enough for that. But he was very encouraging and very convincing, and I said, okay, I'll give it a start. And I secretly hoped for a nice, simple module to start out, and maybe I can dip my toe in. Nope. Moose. So as soon as I calmed myself down, took some breaths, I read through the open issues, and I saw a documentation issue. Apparently there were like 500 bad links. So I went through them all, and I searched for more Moose links, and I gathered them up, and I submitted my pull request, and everyone was very nice. And now, a year later, I've contributed to several more modules as part of that, and a few other things. And it looks really impressive. Like, I'm a contributor to Moose and Distzilla. So, yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that. And actually, not all of them were quality fixes. Encode Guest now has a command line interface that you can just throw a file at. That was me. So, yeah. And my first module. I won't talk about it here. It's, yeah, a few of us use it. It didn't go completely smooth. Always spell check everything. You know, that's what happens, I guess. And that spent, by the way, like 2 or 3 weeks on prepan, and nobody mentioned that. And then my first YAPC, and Perl is so alive, and the talks were great, the hallway conversations were great, and I just went home fired up. So my point here, and this is for new people, consider it tips, and for the veterans, consider it my thanks. Get connected, talk to other programmers, look at their code, have them look at your code. Don't hesitate to participate, because this is an incredible community built off brilliant technology. And, oh, by the way, rock stars giving out all their code, just leaving it laying around for free for everyone to look through and cheat off of. And I mean, I haven't even paid these people. Suckers. So, who I really am is Mike LaGrasta, and you can find me on GitHub, Twitter, Instructables, CPAN. And I'd love to meet more people, because I don't know a lot of you. So if you want an interesting conversation in the hallway, ask me about my desk, which has 80,000 views on YouTube. More than anyone else's desk, I'm sure. And okay, since I knew that would make people curious, here it is, and it does involve Perl. It can also report the status of all of my servers. Next lightning talk.
Okay, go now.
Just to let you know, I work for Perceptics. We do employee surveys. It's a lot of web design, but it's a full Perl stack. We're hiring. So if you're looking for a job, come talk to me or Wallace. I don't see him in the room, but yeah. Thanks, guys.
Whoa. That's awful small. Where's the embiggen button? We'll just do that a few times. Hello. I'm Jason McIntosh. I wanted to share something I developed a year ago. This is a reference implementation of a universal text encoder that happens to be written in JavaScript. But I think you'll agree that it carries implications for Perl, as well as all other human endeavor. So it's available from my website, jmac.org, if you scroll down to the inch-long text encoder. Now, as this says, basically, it accepts text of arbitrary length, and it encodes it into a single line of 1 inch or less in length. It can be of varying thickness for easy visibility. I shall demonstrate with, let's see, what shall I say? Hello, Orlando. I am having a good time at the conference formerly known as YAPC. Yes, now as you can see, were this page printed out, this line here would be less than 1 inch long because it is this many inches. That's a 0 followed by a decimal point. And then I know what you're thinking, Jason, this doesn't make any sense. It's 2016 where you have to support emojis. Well, I have that covered, as you can see. Throw in a little some, there you go. And that is covered. The way this works, it's very simple. Basically, the text is converted into UTF-8, and that's turned into a hexadecimal number, which is then turned into decimal. You stick a decimal point in front of that. You can then print that out. You can put it on a t-shirt. I'm sure nanomaterials, aerospace could do something with this. Body modification. Basically, as I say on my webpage, I don't know why no one's done anything with this before. So I do, as I say here, I publish and release the method, which I fully expect to have a singular and permanent transformative effect on all human communication for the whole world's free and everlasting use. Share it in friendship and in peace. Again, that is at jmac.org/encoder. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So I call this thing U2 can U2F, and someone immediately says, "Oh, it needs to have Bono in it." So there's Bono with his two factors. Well, I don't know why. Hi, my name's Rob. I'm at Rob N. I work for Fastmail. I have some customers in the room. Thank you. If you're not a customer, come and talk to me. I have stickers. I'm Australian, which should be obvious from the accent, and I don't understand why Americans have such this rapt fascination with Australians, but I don't care. I intend to use it and include every export quality stereotype in my talk possible in the hopes that one way or another you'll be entertained. So two-factor auth is something that's kind of important to me. So the basic idea is you need to log in. To log in, you present some credentials, something that is associated with you. And normally that's something you know. This is one of Australia's greatest sons, Yahoo Serious, thinking carefully about his password. He is well known for good password practices in Australia. But sometimes you need more than that, and you need a second factor, and it's usually something you have. So legendary folk hero Mick Crocodile Dundee with his physical artifact. Very impressive, but unfortunately we are not all as good a knife play as this fellow, and we have to rely on the more mundane, which tends to be something related to our cell phone. But we can hope. There's probably a knife-shaped case on eBay, which will get you halfway there. So universal two-factor is an open set of standards for building... that's bothering me. For building a USB device that can act as a second-factor device. And the major difference with it is that the application on your computer that talks to the device, usually your web browser, speaks directly to the device over USB, which means there is, if you're familiar with other two-factor devices, TOTP, these kinds of things, it generates a code that you then have to type in. The only reason there's no more of that, your application uses some JavaScript, talks to the browser, and it becomes a one-touch kind of prospect. It does a bunch of, basically the host sends it a challenge, it signs the challenge, it's got serious crypto in there. I'm not a crypto head, but all the crypto people say it's fine. And it returns that back, and then you can then verify it's the real actual device there. There's plenty of manufacturers. The cheapest ones that I've seen are €9, which is the NitroKey U2F, so it's very cheap to get started. Unfortunately, there are not Australian-themed U2F keys yet, but I live in hope. So there's a bunch of services out there that currently support it. Dropbox, GitHub, and Google all worked on this spec together. They all implement it really, really well. It's not just for web services. There is a library called libu2f, which can be built into just about anything. It's just a C library. And PAM-U2F plugs into Unix's authentication stack, which lets you then unlock your laptop using your security key. Fastmail, we'll have it next month because I was almost finished and then had to come to the conference and finding it very difficult to work. And then your service, your web app, whether it's an off-the-shelf application, your web service, your whatever you have that requires someone to log in and is written in Perl, you can now get AuthentU2F. I can explain these pictures later, I just don't want to run out of time. So you go to CPAN, you grab AuthentU2F, it's a pure Perl implementation of the server parts of the spec. It literally has 3 functions. It generates challenges and it verifies the 2 types of responses that can come back. One is a registration. I connect this individual specific device with a user, or during login, I confirm that the user has a device that they've previously registered with their account. It comes with examples. It can interrupt with libu2f. It works with Chromium's implementation, which of course is in Chrome and in Opera and any other Chromium-based browsers. And then you're done. Your service is secure, your users are happy because they have something that has better security and a better user interface than any other sort of thing out there. So you go home, you have dinner in Australia, that will be Vegemite toast, obviously. And that's kind of it. Come and ask me about U2F, come and ask me about Australia, come and ask me about whatever. I will have slides and a demo server up on robn.io later today if I don't drink too much. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Stephen Nunnally. I'm from Grant Street Group, and I'm going to talk to you today about one of the applications I helped develop there called Tellurium. This is a automated scripting web app testing kind of application, and the cool thing about it is it's in fairly plain English script, and of course everything in the server backend is all written in Perl, which is pretty cool. And the idea that of the plain conversational English is that anybody can write these tests, and so you can take people that do regular regression testing by hand on websites and kind of take those scripts and just turn them right into a Tellurium test. So for instance here, I figured, well, what could be fun? So let's just order pizza, right? And unfortunately I didn't get quite the whole way. But so we start off by just declaring the URL we want to go to, which is pizzahut.com. I pick a persona which just has login information and stuff like that, so I can mask that data and kind of keep that separate. So for instance, will just be me, Stephen. And then I created a little phrase, which is just a way to kind of refactor out some code, and so you don't have to have all this information in there, and it's easy to read. And so this one just logs us into Pizza Hut. Some of the cool things about the phrase, it can be used anywhere. And for instance, it'll have information like it can grab the current persona's login name and password, so you don't have to actually type that out. You can run it with all different kinds of people. So in that case, it'll be grabbing my information. And then you can eventually start working on elements. You can grab them by like the href or the text or like the ID, or even if it's a really complicated one, like this hotel div that I have to grab eventually, you can just give it a really long XPath and kind of simplify the wording a little bit. So let's go ahead and give it a run and see how far it gets. So it should log me in. It should go ahead and pick a pizza and then choose that we want delivery. And of course, we want it here at the hotel. So here it is going through step by step. Right now we're going through that phrase, which is logging us into Pizza Hut. I think the Wi-Fi is a little slow to pull up the pictures right now, but you can see some of the tests are passing. The thens are like assertions, like the whens are actual actions. And so while that's running, I think you guys can tell that it's doing stuff. Let's actually go to you know, the one that's already out of the oven and kind of look at it. So if we blow this up, then yeah, you can see that we did get to pizzahut.com. Wow, this is super slow. All right. Let's go back to this. We got to pizzahut.com. I think you can see it pretty well there. Eventually, we clicked the sign-in link. We dropped in one of my ancient emails. It's netscape.net for those that can't see it. Then once you click in sign in, we can check that, oh, yep, welcome, Steven. So that means we actually signed in successfully. And then if we go all the way down to the bottom, well, we clicked on an order, which brought up whether we want delivery or carry out. We chose delivery, and then, like I said, there was that really long worded one because I had to pick out the hotel address out of the previous addresses I used. And so I picked out the hotel address, and then that clicked order now. And then finally, we wanted to add an order to a pizza, so let me just go ahead and let this one load. And so I clicked the add to cart, and then of course that pulled up that screen where we could have continued to hit checkout and said, you know, we'll pay cash for it, or when we get here, maybe the Perl Foundation would, I don't know. But anyway, so that's Tellurium. It's, if you go to www.te52.com, it's free to sign up, free to use, and you know, maybe you have reasons for use of it at your company. Thank you.
We'll stop here. It's probably nicer to stop here, and that way we don't have to shut this out.
So that was it for the first lightning talks. Everyone wave goodbye to YouTube. Bye, YouTube. And now that they're gone,